The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, silence falling faster than the crystal fragments. A collective intake of breath rippled through Lumiere's dining room, the elegant space where politicians sealed deals and celebrities escaped paparazzi. The restaurant's chandeliers cast golden light across shocked faces as all eyes turned toward Table 7. Theodore Blackwell hadn't meant to drop his glass, or perhaps he had. The tech billionaire's scowl suggested the latter as he stared down at the young server who'd bumped his elbow. The server, a thin man barely out of college, stood frozen in terror, his complexion matching the pristine tablecloth. "Do you have any idea how much that vintage costs?" Blackwell's voice was low but carried across the hushed restaurant. "More than you'll make this month." From the service station, Eliza Matthews observed the scene with quiet intensity. It was her first day at Lumiere, and already she was cataloging the restaurant's power dynamics. The weight of expensive plates stacked on her arms felt insignificant compared to the weight of the atmosphere. "It was an accident, sir. We'll bring you another immediately," the young server stammered, his hands visibly shaking as he bent to collect the larger glass fragments. Mr. Reynolds, Lumiere's manager, materialized from nowhere. Tall, perpetually tense, with graying temples that matched his silver tie, he moved with the practiced urgency of someone accustomed to managing crises of wealth and ego. "Mr. Blackwell, please accept our profound apologies," Reynolds said, positioning himself between the billionaire and the mortified server. "Tyler, that's enough. Go get a proper cleaning kit." He turned back to Blackwell with a deferential smile. "Another 82 Krug immediately, on the house, of course. And perhaps the chef's special amuse-bouche while you wait?" Blackwell's gaze flickered over Reynolds, assessing and dismissing him in the same moment. "Fine." He waved a hand in casual dismissal, attention already returning to his companions, three men in equally expensive suits whose laughter had halted at the interruption. Eliza continued her work, bussing tables with efficiency that belied her awareness of being watched. Earlier, during the pre-shift meeting, Reynolds had assessed the staff with calculating eyes. Despite her resume hospitality management degree, 3 years at the Waldorf, he'd assigned her to bus tables rather than serve. "We like our new staff to understand all aspects of service," he'd explained with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. The real reason hadn't required explanation. Lumiere maintained a certain aesthetic, and Reynolds clearly believed Eliza, with her dark skin and natural hair, belonged behind the scenes. The kitchen doors swung open as Eliza entered with her tray of dirty glasses. Heat and chaos enveloped her, a stark contrast to the cultivated calm of the dining room. Line cooks moved with practiced precision, calling orders in their own abbreviated language. At the pass, Chef Moreau inspected each plate with military scrutiny, occasionally barking commands in French-accented English. "New girl? Table 7 needs reset pronto," called the expediter, barely glancing up from his tickets. "Reynolds says personal attention." Eliza nodded, loading her tray with fresh napkins and silverware. She had worked in enough upscale establishments to recognize the patterns forming around her, the invisible hierarchies, the unspoken rules. The restaurant industry was the same everywhere, only the faces changed. Back in the dining room, she approached Table 7 with practiced invisibility, the skill all good servers mastered present when needed, ghost-like otherwise. "I'm telling you, the merger is practically done," Blackwell was saying, swirling his fresh champagne. "The board thinks they have a choice, but with what I've got on Davidson," he chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Let's just say leverage is everything in this business." Eliza kept her eyes down as she reset the place setting, but her ears caught every word. 15 years in restaurants had taught her that the wealthy often spoke freely around service staff, as though their existence registered below notice like discussing secrets in front of furniture. Reynolds hovered nearby, watching Eliza's every move with hawk-like intensity. When she finished, he stepped forward, blocking her path as she attempted to return to her station. "When you're around Mr. Blackwell's table, move faster," he murmured, voice barely audible. "And try not to make eye contact. He prefers servers who know their place." Eliza nodded once, her expression revealing nothing of the calculations happening behind her eyes. "Understood." Throughout the evening, Blackwell's behavior deteriorated in direct proportion to his alcohol consumption. His voice grew louder, his demands more specific, his criticism of the staff more cutting. By the third course, even his companions seemed uncomfortable with his behavior, though none dared contradict him. Tyler, the young server who'd spilled the champagne, had been relegated to tables in the far corner. Each time he passed near the kitchen, his shoulders hunched a little more. Eliza noted the other servers giving Blackwell's table wide berth, their movements betraying practiced wariness. It was during the fourth course, a seared scallop with truffle foam, that the breaking point came. "This is overcooked," Blackwell announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. He pushed the plate toward the edge of the table where a server named Maria was refilling water glasses. "Take it back and tell that so-called chef to do his job properly." Maria, a woman in her 40s with streaks of gray in her dark hair, nodded professionally. "Of course, sir. I'll have a new one prepared immediately." "And while you're at it," Blackwell continued, eyes narrowing as he examined her name tag, "tell Reynolds I want someone else serving our table. Someone who understands quality." Eliza, clearing plates from the adjacent table, saw Maria's composed expression flicker just briefly, a momentary crack in her professional veneer. Behind that crack lay years of similar incidents, swallowed pride, and necessary endurance. Reynolds appeared as he always did when Blackwell's voice rose above a certain decibel. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Your staff is the problem," Blackwell replied, gesturing dismissively toward Maria. "This one especially. I want someone else." "One." Reynolds nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. I'll serve your table personally." He turned to Maria. "Take over Section 3. As Maria retreated with the plate, Eliza finished clearing her table and followed her toward the kitchen. In the short service corridor, she caught up with the older woman. "You handled that professionally," Eliza said quietly. Maria's smile was tired. "That's the 5th time he's been here this month. Always the same." She squared her shoulders before pushing through the kitchen doors. "Reynolds won't do anything. Blackwell drops 10 grand every visit." Inside the kitchen, Chef Moreau was already preparing a fresh scallop, his movements sharp with irritation. "Nothing wrong with first one," he muttered in his thick accent. "Nothing." The kitchen staff exchanged knowing looks, but said nothing. Eliza noticed Tyler in the corner, hands shaking slightly as he arranged dessert plates. As Eliza returned to the dining room, Blackwell's voice rose again. This time he was criticizing the wine selection, describing it as pedestrian despite its $900 price tag. Reynolds stood beside him, nodding apologetically, promising to bring something more suitable. Eliza moved to her assigned section, hyper-aware of the undercurrents flowing through the restaurant. Other diners were noticing Blackwell's behavior now, some watching with discomfort, others with the detached interest of those witnessing someone else's discomfort from a safe distance. When Reynolds directed her to clear Blackwell's table after the main course, Eliza approached with the same calm efficiency she'd maintained all evening. As she reached for Blackwell's plate, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "You're new," he stated, examining her face with cold curiosity. His eyes flicked to her name tag. "Eliza, tell me, why does Reynolds have someone like you bussing tables instead of serving?" The implication in his tone was unmistakable. Eliza met his gaze steadily, her expression professional. "I'm still learning the menu, sir." She gently but firmly extracted her wrist from his grip. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "I doubt that's the real reason." He turned to Reynolds, who hovered anxiously nearby. "Reynolds, your hiring practices are interesting. Don't you think you should keep the help where they belong?" A charged silence fell over the surrounding tables. Reynolds's face paled, caught between placating his VIP and the inappropriate nature of the comment. "Mr. Blackwell," he began uncertainly. Eliza continued collecting plates, her movements precise and unhurried. The weight of the expensive china in her hands was nothing compared to the weight of the moment. Years of similar encounters had taught her to read the situation perfectly. Blackwell was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push. "Will Eliza tolerate what everyone else accepts as normal?" she thought to herself, maintaining her composure. "Or does she see something they don't?" The staff meeting before the dinner rush the following evening had an edge to it. Reynolds paced at the front of the small break room, hands clasped behind his back like a general addressing troops before battle. "Blackwell's returning tonight," he announced, causing a ripple of tension through the assembled servers. "He's bringing the CEO of VentureX Capital. This could mean significant business for Lumiere, so I expect nothing short of perfection." His gaze swept across the room, lingering on Eliza. "Matthews, you'll continue bussing tables." Tyler, the server who'd spilled the champagne, stared at his shoes. Maria's face remained impassive, though her fingers tightened around her order pad. Beside Eliza, a veteran server named Jackson raised an eyebrow almost imperceptibly. "And remember," Reynolds continued, "the customer is always right, especially when the customer is worth $3 billion. As the staff dispersed, Jackson fell into step beside Eliza. "Reynolds assigned me to Blackwell's table," he said quietly. "Lucky me." Jackson was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the easy confidence of someone who'd been in the industry long enough to be unimpressed by wealth or status. "Stick close tonight," he murmured. "Something tells me you notice things others miss." Blackwell arrived precisely at 8, accompanied by a silver-haired man with piercing eyes and a woman in a tailored suit who never looked up from her tablet. Reynolds escorted them to the best table, the one with the perfect view of both the room and the garden beyond the windows. Jackson approached with practiced deference, presenting the wine list with a small bow. "Mr. Blackwell, welcome back to Lumiere. May I suggest the Chateau Margaux 2015? It's exceptional this evening." Blackwell barely glanced at the list. "We'll have the Romanée Conti, the 2010, not the 2012. Eliza, arranging glasses at the service station, saw Jackson's expression flicker. The Romanée Conti was the most expensive wine on the menu, $8,500 a bottle, and the 2010 wasn't significantly better than the 2012, just more rare. "Excellent choice, sir," Jackson replied smoothly. As the evening progressed, Eliza moved through her duties while keeping Blackwell's table in her peripheral vision. She noticed Jackson maintaining a perfect balance of attentiveness and invisibility, a skill that came from decades of experience. Yet even his expertise couldn't shield him from Blackwell's growing displeasure. "This wine should have been decanted longer," Blackwell declared after tasting the Romanée Conti. "It's not breathing properly." "My apologies, sir," Jackson responded. "I'll have another bottle opened immediately and ensure it's properly decanted." "Don't bother," Blackwell waved dismissively. "Just bring me the Petrus instead. Perhaps you can manage not to ruin that one." The $12,000 bottle of Petrus. Eliza saw Reynolds stiffen from across the room, though whether from concern about the expense or fear of further displeasure was unclear. Jackson nodded and retreated to the wine cellar, his face a careful mask. When Maria approached to deliver bread to a nearby table, Blackwell summoned her with a snap of his fingers. "You! What's good here that won't be ruined by incompetent preparation?" Maria's smile remained professional, though Eliza noticed her knuckles whitening around her serving tray. "The Dover sole is exceptional tonight, sir. Chef Moreau prepares it tableside." Blackwell's companions nodded appreciatively at the suggestion, but Blackwell himself narrowed his eyes. "Last time you recommended something, it was overcooked. Why should I trust your judgment now?" The woman with the tablet finally looked up, a flash of discomfort crossing her face. The soul sounds perfect, Maria. We'll all have that. Eliza watched Maria return to the kitchen, her shoulders rigid with tension. Moving to the service station, Eliza took out her small black notebook, ostensibly used for orders, and made a quick note. Jackson appeared beside her, reaching for water pitchers. "He's worse tonight," Jackson murmured, "showing off for his guests." "He's testing boundaries," Eliza replied quietly, "seeing how much he can get away with." Jackson gave her a curious look. "Most new staff just keep their heads down. You're different." Eliza smiled slightly. "I've seen his type before." She tucked the notebook into her apron pocket. "Will Reynolds's fear of losing Blackwell's business blind him to the growing tension among his staff?" In the kitchen, the atmosphere was electric with stress. Chef Moreau barked orders as the line cooks executed his commands with military precision. Tyler huddled in a corner, polishing glasses with mechanical movements. Maria stood at the pass, waiting for her orders, her expression distant. Eliza approached her. "Are you okay?" Maria's laugh was barely audible. "This job pays my daughter's college tuition. I've dealt with worse than Theodore Blackwell." Chef Moreau called for service, and Maria squared her shoulders. "Just another night in paradise," she muttered, lifting the tray of meticulously plated appetizers. The contrast between the heated kitchen and the frigid dining room hit Eliza like a physical wave as she pushed through the swinging doors. The air conditioning was kept at what the staff called billionaire temperature, cold enough that female guests needed their designer wraps, creating another opportunity for servers to demonstrate attentiveness. Blackwell's mood continued to deteriorate as the meal progressed. The waitress was acceptable. The amuse-bouche was pedestrian. Even the famous Dover sole, prepared tableside with theatrical flair by Chef Moreau himself, only elicited a grudging nod. But it was during dessert that the situation escalated beyond mere rudeness. Jackson was presenting the dessert menu when the young busboy, a new hire, even newer than Eliza, approached to clear empty glasses. As the boy reached for a water goblet, Blackwell suddenly pushed back his chair, directly into the busboy's path. The collision was inevitable. The busboy stumbled, his tray of empty glasses crashing to the floor in a symphony of shattering crystal. Silence fell over the restaurant, punctuated only by the tinkling of the last glass fragments settling on the marble. Blackwell stood, his expression thunderous. "You clumsy fool! Look at this! My suit is ruined!" A few drops of water had splashed onto his sleeve, nothing that wouldn't dry in minutes. But Blackwell was already in full outrage. "Reynolds! Where is Reynolds?" The manager appeared instantly, his face ashen. "Mr. Blackwell, I cannot apologize enough." "Don't apologize. Fire him. Now." Blackwell pointed at the busboy, who knelt frozen among the broken glass, eyes wide with panic. "I want him gone." Reynolds hesitated, caught between his VIP's demand and the excessive nature of the punishment. "Mr. Blackwell, perhaps nothing. Either he goes or we do, and we take our business elsewhere." The busboy began picking up the larger pieces of glass, his hands trembling so badly he cut himself. A small drop of blood fell to the white marble floor. Eliza moved forward, kneeling beside him with a napkin. "Let me help," she said quietly, pressing the cloth to his cut. To Reynolds, she added, "I'll take care of this." Reynolds nodded, relieved to have the immediate problem addressed. He turned back to Blackwell. "Sir, please allow us to comp your entire meal this evening. And perhaps some desserts? Chef's special chocolate soufflé, perhaps?" The mention of free food seemed to mollify Blackwell slightly. He sat back down, adjusting his cuffs. "Fine. But I want that boy gone by the time we finish." As Eliza helped the busboy to his feet and guided him toward the kitchen, she noticed other diners watching the scene. Some looked uncomfortable, a few whispered to each other, but most simply returned to their meals, the momentary drama already forgotten in the face of excellent food and flowing wine. In the kitchen, she helped the busboy, whose name was Miguel, She learned bandage his cut. His eyes were bright with unshed tears of humiliation. "It wasn't an accident," he whispered. "He moved his chair right when I was behind him. I saw his reflection in the window." Eliza nodded. "I know. I saw it too." She took out her phone and, shielding it with her body from the rest of the kitchen staff, snapped a quick photo of his cut hand. "Document everything," she said softly. Miguel looked confused. "Why? It's not like it matters. Reynolds will fire me." "Maybe. Maybe not." Eliza pocketed her phone. "Will anyone stand up to Blackwell, or has his money truly bought everyone's dignity?" Back in the dining room, Reynolds had indeed managed to smooth things over with complimentary soufflés and another round of expensive cognac. Blackwell was holding court again, his momentary rage replaced by expansive gestures as he explained something to his companions. Eliza positioned herself at the service station nearest to Blackwell's table, ostensibly polishing silverware while keeping her ears tuned to their conversation. "The regulatory board is a joke," Blackwell was saying, swirling his cognac. "3 members are former colleagues, and the 4th has a gambling problem I've made sure stays private. The approval is guaranteed." The silver-haired man frowned. "The environmental impact is irrelevant," Blackwell cut him off. "The profit margins on this project will make our shareholders forget about a few displaced communities and some contaminated groundwater. It's all about the bottom line, Harrison, you know that." The woman with the tablet cleared her throat. "The PR implications are your department's problem," Blackwell interrupted again. "That's what we pay you for, isn't it, Claire? To make the ugly truths palatable to the public?" He chuckled. "Besides, who's going to stop us? Those communities don't have the resources to fight a protracted legal battle." Eliza continued polishing the same fork, her movements slow and deliberate as she absorbed every word. Reynolds passed by, giving her a sharp look that clearly meant move along. She nodded and retreated to the kitchen, but not before hearing Blackwell's final comment. "Power isn't about being liked. It's about being feared and needed at the same time. These people?" He gestured around the restaurant. "They fear me because they need my money. It's beautiful in its simplicity." In the relative safety of the kitchen corridor, Eliza leaned against the wall, her mind racing. The pieces were falling into place, forming a pattern she'd seen before in different settings, but with the same underlying structure. The question now was what to do with this information. Will Eliza's careful observations give her the leverage she needs, she thought, or is she gathering evidence for nothing? The employee restroom at Lumiere was nothing like the opulent facilities offered to guests. A single bare bulb cast harsh light over the small space where Eliza stood, palms pressed against the cool metal of the utility sink. She needed a moment, just one to gather herself before returning to the floor. The image of Miguel's trembling hands wouldn't leave her mind. Nor would Blackwell's casual cruelty, so confidently displayed because he believed there would be no consequences. There never had been before. Eliza closed her eyes and, unbidden, another restaurant materialized in her memory. More modern than Lumiere, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. She'd been wearing a different uniform then, a tailored suit, not a server's attire, seated across from men like Blackwell as they discussed acquisitions and mergers over meals that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. 3 years ago. It felt like a lifetime. "You don't understand how the game is played, Matthews," her former boss had told her the day she'd submitted her report documenting the company's systemic wage theft affecting thousands of service workers. "Some trees need to be shaken. Others need to remain undisturbed." The following week, her position had been eliminated in restructuring. The report buried. Her career in corporate hospitality management effectively over. Every high-end hotel and restaurant group had suddenly found her qualifications not quite what they were looking for. The blacklisting hadn't been official, such things never were, but it had been comprehensive. Only now, starting again at the bottom, had she found employment in the industry she'd once been rising through. Eliza opened her eyes, meeting her own gaze in the spotted mirror. "Some systems don't change until someone changes them," she whispered, echoing the words her mentor had told her before she'd submitted that fateful report. Her hand moved to her pocket, fingers brushing against the edge of a business card she kept there. Not Lumiere's card, but her own. The embossed letters spelled out credentials and connections most wouldn't expect from someone clearing their plates. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Eliza?" Maria's voice. "Reynolds is looking for you. Blackwell wants another round of drinks." Stepping back onto the restaurant floor was like re-entering a theater production already in progress. The actors, staff, and guests alike moved through their prescribed patterns, speaking their expected lines. Only Eliza seemed aware of the artifice, the performance of deference and privilege playing out beneath the crystal chandeliers. She found Jackson at the service bar, waiting for a complex order of after-dinner drinks for Blackwell's table. His expression was tight, professional mask slipping just slightly. "Miguel's gone," he said quietly as she approached. "Reynolds had him clock out and leave through the back. Kid was crying in the locker room." Eliza felt a cold anger solidify within her. "Because of a manufactured accident." Jackson glanced around before responding. "Been here 15 years. Seen a dozen Blackwells come and go. Different names, same entitlement." He shook his head. "Reynolds enables it. Says it's just business, the cost of catering to wealth." "And the rest of the staff?" "Most need the job too badly to rock the boat." Jackson arranged crystal glasses on his tray with practiced precision. "This place pays better than most. Benefits are decent, so people endure." Eliza nodded, understanding completely. "Has Blackwell always targeted the staff like this?" "Gets worse every visit. Started with complaints, escalated to demands for different servers. Now he's getting people fired." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Maria's been here longer than me. She says he did something similar at 11 Madison, got a sommelier fired for suggesting a wine he didn't like." "And no one pushes back?" Jackson gave her a measured look. "Would you? In this industry?" The question hung between them, loaded with implication. Eliza knew exactly what he meant. The hospitality world was smaller than outsiders realized. Reputations deserved or not followed you. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "pushing back requires the right leverage." Something in her tone made Jackson study her more closely. "You're not just a server, are you?" Before she could answer, Maria appeared beside them, her normally composed demeanor fractured by obvious distress. "Blackwell is asking for you specifically, Eliza," she said, voice low and urgent. "He wants you to serve their final round of drinks." Jackson frowned. "That's not a good sign. He's targeting you now." Eliza remained calm. "What exactly did he say?" "He told Reynolds he wants to see if the new girl can manage not to disappoint him." Maria's expression was apologetic. "Reynolds is looking for you. He's not happy." The manager found her moments later, his face taut with stress. "Matthews, Blackwell has requested you personally." His tone suggested this was somehow her fault. "Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact unless necessary. Just serve the drinks and step away. Understood?" Eliza nodded, the picture of compliance. "Understood." Reynolds hesitated, seeming to struggle with something. Finally, he said, "Look, I know Blackwell can be difficult, but he represents significant business for us. Not just his own tabs, but the clients he brings in." His justification sounded rehearsed, as though he'd delivered it many times before, perhaps most often to himself. "I'm aware of how the business works, Mr. Reynolds." Something in her tone made him look at her more sharply. "Just do your job, Matthews. Nothing more, nothing less." As Reynolds walked away, Eliza turned to find both Jackson and Maria watching her with curious expressions. "What's your story?" Maria asked quietly. "You handle this differently than most new hires." Eliza allowed herself a small smile. "Let's just say I've been on both sides of the table." In that moment, Eliza made her decision. The pattern was clear. Blackwell's behavior would continue escalating, affecting more staff, unless something interrupted the cycle. Reynolds would never be that interruption. He was too invested in the status quo, too fearful of losing business. The memory of her mentor surfaced again. "Change comes from unexpected places, Eliza, from those willing to risk something that matters." She'd risked her career once before, standing up for workers being exploited. The cost had been high, but she'd do it again. Some principles weren't negotiable. A server hurried past, whispering, "Reynolds is looking for you. Blackwell's getting impatient." Eliza squared her shoulders, decision made. The path forward was clear now, though not without risk. As she moved toward Blackwell's table, drink tray balanced perfectly in her hands, she felt an odd sense of calm. 3 years ago, she'd acted out of righteous indignation, unprepared for the consequences. Now she understood the game better, its rules, its players, and most importantly, how to change its outcome. Some systems don't change until someone changes them, and Eliza Matthews was about to become that someone again. Blackwell's table had taken on the atmosphere of a royal court. He sat at its center, holding forth on market trends while his companions nodded at appropriate intervals. The remains of their lavish meal-empty plates, half-finished desserts, crystal glasses smudged with fingerprints, created a tableau of expensive excess. The conversation halted as Eliza approached with the tray of drinks. Blackwell's eyes fixed on her, his expression a mixture of amusement and condescension. "Ah, the new girl," he said, voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "Reynolds tells me you're very eager to please." The innuendo was deliberate, designed to unsettle and diminish. Eliza simply smiled professionally and began placing drinks on the table with practiced precision. "Your Macallan 25, sir," she said, setting a crystal tumbler before him. "And the Japanese whiskey for Mr. Harrison." She continued distributing the drinks, her movements calm and efficient. Blackwell watched her, eyes narrowing slightly at her composure. People like him expected, perhaps even desired, visible discomfort from those they targeted. Her lack of reaction seemed to irritate him. "You're wasted as a busboy," he said, deliberately using the masculine term. "Tell me, Eliza, what did you do before lowering yourself to clearing plates at Lumiere?" The question was a trap. Show too much pride in previous accomplishments, and he'd mock her fall in status. Show too little, and he'd dismiss her as unambitious, unworthy of notice. "I was in corporate hospitality management," she answered simply, neither ashamed nor boastful. Something flickered in Blackwell's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her educated tone or professional background. It disappeared quickly, replaced by calculated cruelty. "And now you're serving drinks," he said with exaggerated pity. "Life comes at you fast, doesn't it?" His companions shifted uncomfortably. The woman Claire, Eliza recalled, checked her watch, perhaps hoping to signal an end to the evening. Harrison sipped his whiskey, eyes averted. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Eliza asked, her tone unchanged. Blackwell leaned back, swirling his Macallan. "Actually, yes. Tell Reynolds I want to speak with him, and tell him to bring that Chef Moreau with him. I have some feedback about tonight's meal." As Eliza turned to leave, Blackwell added loudly, "And have someone else serve us for the remainder of the evening. I find your attitude lacking." The deliberate public humiliation was a power play, designed to reinforce his position at the top of the restaurant's social hierarchy. Eliza nodded once and walked away, aware of the eyes following her staff and diners alike, witnessing another casualty of Blackwell's ego. Reynolds intercepted her before she could reach the kitchen. "What did you do?" he demanded in a harsh whisper.
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Blackwell would like to speak with you and Chef Moreau. He also requested a different server for the remainder of the evening. Reynolds's face tightened. Go wait in my office. We'll discuss this after they leave. As he strode toward the kitchen to fetch the chef, Eliza noted his tense shoulders, the rigid line of his spine. Reynolds was afraid, not just of losing Blackwell's business, but of the billionaire's influence in wider circles. One word from someone like Blackwell could affect a restaurant's reputation in ways no reviewer could match. Instead of going to Reynolds' office, Eliza moved to the service station and took out her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly over the screen, sending a carefully worded text with specific financial information to a number saved simply as JP. The response came almost immediately. Confirmed. Proceeding as discussed. She slipped the phone back into her pocket just as Jackson appeared beside her.
Reynolds looks ready to explode, he murmured.
What happened?
Blackwell happened, she replied quietly.
It was never about the service. He needed someone to target tonight.
Jackson shook his head. Reynolds will probably let you go. It's his pattern sacrifice staff to appease Blackwell.
Perhaps, Eliza said, watching as Reynolds and a clearly irritated Chef Moreau approached Blackwell's table.
But patterns can be broken.
Across the dining room, Blackwell's voice rose as he criticized the meal in specific, technical terms that suggested he'd researched his complaints in advance. Moreau's face flushed with professional indignation, but Reynolds placed a warning hand on the chef's arm. Other diners were noticing now, some watching openly, others pretending absorption in their own meals while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. The restaurant's ambient noise had dropped, conversations hushed as people strained to hear. Blackwell was in his element, performing dominance for his audience. The risotto was overcooked, the duck was underseasoned, and the soufflé collapsed almost immediately. For these prices, I expect perfection. Chef Moreau, a man who'd earned Michelin stars on 2 continents, looked as though he might spontaneously combust. Monsieur, I assure you, the execution was amateur, Blackwell interrupted. Perhaps in France such standards are acceptable, but here... He broke off as the main entrance doors opened, admitting 4 individuals whose appearances immediately commanded attention. 2 men and 2 women, all in impeccable business attire, moving with the easy confidence of those accustomed to authority. Reynolds turned, confusion crossing his features as the maitre d' escorted the new arrivals directly toward Blackwell's table. This breach of protocol approaching a table without the manager's approval momentarily derailed his thoughts. "Excuse me," he began, but fell silent as the tallest of the newcomers extended a business card. "Good evening, Mr. Reynolds. I'm Jonathan Pearson, chairman of the board for Lumiere Restaurant Group." His British accent was crisp, his manner courteous but firm. "I understand Mr. Blackwell is dining with you tonight." Blackwell, initially annoyed at the interruption, straightened in his chair as he recognized Pearson. "Jonathan," he acknowledged, tone suddenly cautious. "This is unexpected." "Indeed," Pearson smiled thinly. "As was the call I received about your behavior here tonight." Reynolds looked between them, bewilderment evident. "Sir, I wasn't aware you were in town. Had I known—" "This isn't a planned visit, Mr. Reynolds." Pearson's gaze remained on Blackwell. "Theodore, I believe you've met my colleagues, Amara Okafor, our chief financial officer, Daniel Chen, legal counsel, and Dr. Sarah Winters, head of ethics and compliance." Each nodded in turn, their expressions professional but unyielding. Blackwell's companions shifted uncomfortably, sensing the power dynamics in the room rearranging themselves like tectonic plates. "What is this about?" Blackwell demanded, though his usual confidence had diminished noticeably. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Pearson suggested, glancing meaningfully at the surrounding tables. Blackwell's laugh was forced. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. I have nothing to hide." "Very well." Pearson nodded to the woman beside him, Amara Okafor, the CFO. She opened a slim leather portfolio. Mr. Blackwell, we've received documented evidence of your pattern of abusive behavior towards staff at multiple establishments within our restaurant group. Tonight's incidents are merely the latest in a concerning trend. Reynolds interjected, "There's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Blackwell is one of our most valued—" "Mr. Reynolds," Pearson cut in smoothly, "your employment contract includes specific clauses regarding staff welfare and dignity in the workplace. Section 17.3 states clearly that management personnel are required to protect staff from abusive treatment, regardless of the source." Reynolds paled visibly. Chef Moreau, sensing a shift in the wind, took a step back, eyes darting between the participants. Blackwell's face had darkened. "This is ridiculous. I've spent hundreds of thousands at your restaurants. You can't seriously be taking the word of some disgruntled servers over mine." "Actually," said the legal counsel, Daniel Chen, speaking for the first time, "we have multiple witnesses, documented incidents, and most troubling evidence that you deliberately created situations to justify terminating staff who displeased you." He glanced toward where Miguel had been stationed earlier. "Including tonight's accident with the busboy." Blackwell's composure cracked.
Who's been feeding you these lies? Reynolds? Moreau? Neither, said Pearson calmly, though I am disappointed they didn't report these incidents themselves. Reynolds began stammering explanations, but Pearson held up a hand to silence him. "Mr. Blackwell, Lumiere Restaurant Group values its relationship with all clients. However, we value our ethical standards and staff welfare more highly. I must inform you that we can no longer welcome you at any of our establishments." The restaurant had fallen completely silent now, every ear tuned to the unprecedented scene unfolding at the center table. Blackwell's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "Do you have any idea who I am? What I can do to your business?" "We're quite aware of your influence, Mr. Blackwell," said Dr. Winters, the ethics officer. "We're simply prioritizing a different kind of value." Blackwell surged to his feet, napkin falling forgotten to the floor. "I want to know who started this. Who made these accusations?" As if on cue, Eliza stepped forward from where she'd been observing nearby. The timing was deliberate, calculated for maximum impact. All eyes turned to her as she approached the table. "That would be me," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the hushed restaurant. Blackwell stared at her, confusion giving way to contempt. "You? A busboy? You think anyone will take your word over mine?" Eliza smiled slightly and reached into her pocket. She withdrew not the restaurant's business card, but her own, placing it carefully on the table before him. "I'm not just a server, Mr. Blackwell. I'm your largest shareholder." The words hung in the air like crystal notes, perfect and cutting. Blackwell snatched up the card, his expression shifting from disbelief to shock as he read, "Eliza Matthews, Chief Investment Officer, Integrity Capital Management." "This isn't possible," he whispered, but the certainty had drained from his voice. "Integrity Capital acquired a 15% stake in Blackwell Technologies 6 months ago through a series of proxy purchases," Eliza explained, her tone conversational despite the charged atmosphere. "We also happen to be the majority investor in Lumiere Restaurant Group." She turned to Pearson. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Jonathan." "Of course, Eliza," he replied with a slight bow. "Your message was quite clear." Reynolds stared at her, mouth slightly open. You own—" "I don't personally own anything, Mr. Reynolds," Eliza corrected gently. "Integrity Capital is an investment firm specializing in ethical business transformations. We identify companies with problematic cultures and work to reform them from within." She turned back to Blackwell, whose face had gone from flushed to ashen. "Sometimes that requires understanding the problem firsthand." "You were spying on me," Blackwell accused, finding his voice at last. "I was observing," Eliza corrected. After receiving multiple reports about your behavior from staff at various establishments, I decided to witness it personally before taking action. She gestured around the restaurant. What I saw tonight and what my colleagues documented over the past month was a pattern of deliberate abuse of power, using wealth and position to demean those you perceive as beneath you. Blackwell's companions had distanced themselves both physically and metaphorically, Harrison already reaching for his coat, Claire closing her tablet with a snap. Money doesn't buy the right to diminish another human being's dignity, Eliza continued, her voice carrying clearly through the silent restaurant. Not here, not anywhere. The ethics officer, Dr. Winters, stepped forward. Mr. Blackwell, as a significant shareholder, Ms. Matthews has called for an ethics review of your company's practices. The board will meet next week to discuss the findings. This is a hostile takeover, Blackwell hissed, but the accusation sounded hollow even to his own ears. This is accountability, Eliza replied simply. Complete silence had fallen over the restaurant. Diners sat frozen, witnessing what felt like a scene from a film playing out before them. Staff members watched from various positions, expressions ranging from shock to cautious hope. Will the systems that protected men like Blackwell continue to stand? Eliza thought, looking at his crumbling facade of power. Or is this the beginning of their dismantling? For several heartbeats, no one moved. The tableau held Blackwell standing rigid with rage and humiliation, his companions calculating their safest exits, the Lumiere board members positioned like sentinels of a new order, and Eliza at the center, calm in the eye of the storm she'd created. Blackwell recovered first, years of boardroom battles providing muscle memory for damage control. His expression shifted from shock to calculated charm with practiced ease. Eliza, Ms. Matthews, clearly there's been a misunderstanding. His voice had lowered, meant for her ears rather than the riveted audience around them. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement beneficial to both parties. The offer hung in the air, an attempted return to familiar territory where problems disappeared with the right price tag. The soft tapping of Eliza's fingernails against her phone provided the only sound as she pulled up a series of text messages. There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Blackwell. Your behavior pattern is thoroughly documented. She held up her phone, displaying time-stamped footage of his earlier accident with Miguel. Modern technology makes accountability much more accessible. Someone at a nearby table whispered, "I'm recording this," loud enough to be heard. A soft chorus of notification sounds rippled through the restaurant as social media apps opened. The public nature of the confrontation was shifting from local to potentially viral. Blackwell's face darkened again. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he growled, abandoning the veneer of civility. "I'll bury your little investment firm. One call to the right people and Integrity Capital will be under investigation by morning." Jonathan Pearson cleared his throat. "That would be ill-advised, Theodore, particularly given what our compliance team discovered while reviewing your company's environmental practices." He gestured to Dr. Winters, who produced another document. "The EPA would find this data quite compelling." Blackwell's silver-haired companion, Harrison, was already standing, gathering his belongings. "I should go," he muttered, avoiding Blackwell's eyes. "Sit down," Blackwell snapped. When Harrison hesitated, Blackwell's voice rose. "I said sit down. We're not finished here." "Actually, I believe we are," Harrison replied, a new firmness in his tone. "Venture X will be reconsidering our partnership in light of tonight's revelations." He nodded respectfully to Eliza. "Ms. Matthews, I look forward to discussing ethical investment strategies with your firm." The defection of his business ally seemed to hit Blackwell harder than anything else. His shoulders sagged momentarily before he straightened again, glaring at Reynolds. "You'll regret allowing this ambush in your restaurant," he threatened. Reynolds, who had been watching the proceedings with increasing comprehension, cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackwell,
As of this moment, it's not my restaurant. He turned to Eliza. I serve at the pleasure of the board. If you find my management approach incompatible with your company's values, we'll discuss your employment tomorrow, Mr. Reynolds, Pearson interjected smoothly, along with certain policy changes regarding staff treatment. A server approached Maria, moving with new confidence. Excuse me, Mr. Blackwell, but I've been asked to bring your check. She placed the leather folder on the table with a small smile. The board has decided not to comp your meal after all. The symbolic gesture wasn't lost on anyone present. The status quo had shifted fundamentally, old deference replaced by calm assertion. Blackwell stood frozen, power and control, the currency he valued above all else, visibly draining from his posture. For perhaps the first time in decades, he found himself without leverage, without allies, without the shield of wealth and influence that had protected him from consequences. Eliza stepped back, giving him space to make his choice, leave with some dignity intact or escalate further and lose even that. For a moment, it seemed he might choose the latter, his hand clenching into a fist at his side. Then, abruptly, a phone chimed. Claire, still seated, glanced at her screen and paled. Theodore, she said urgently, it's already on Twitter. Someone's live tweeting this entire conversation. The notification sounds multiplied as phones throughout the restaurant buzzed with incoming messages. The private confrontation had already transcended the walls of Lumiere, entering the digital domain where it would live indefinitely. Blackwell's gaze swept the room, registering the phones pointed in his direction, the avid expressions, the moment crystallizing into permanent record. Something in his expression changed, a flicker of genuine fear replacing anger. Without another word, he threw several $100 bills on the table, grabbed his coat and strode toward the exit. The perfect posture, the commanding presence that had dominated the room earlier, all were gone, replaced by the stiff movements of a man holding himself together through sheer will. As the door closed behind him, a collective exhale seemed to pass through the restaurant. Conversations resumed, first in whispers, then in normal tones. The spell broken, servers began moving again, clearing tables, pouring wine, continuing the carefully choreographed dance of fine dining. Eliza found herself surrounded by restaurant staff. Jackson clasped her hand briefly. That was worth 15 years of waiting, he said, voice rough with emotion. Maria wiped away a tear. He fired my cousin at Le Bernardin last year for correcting his pronunciation of a menu item. Others shared similar stories, a pattern of abuse extending far beyond Lumiere, touching lives across the industry. The revelations flowed freely now, without fear of repercussion. Reynolds stood awkwardly at the periphery, his authority diminished but not yet redefined. Chef Moreau approached him, saying something in rapid French that made Reynolds wince. Pearson turned to Eliza. Effective as always, he observed quietly, though perhaps more dramatic than our usual approach. Some situations require public accountability, Eliza replied. The industry has normalized this behavior for too long. Dr. Winters nodded. The staff reports were concerning, but seeing it firsthand... She shook her head. The board will fully support the ethics review of Blackwell Technologies. As the initial shock faded, practical questions emerged. What would happen to Lumiere? To Reynolds? To the staff? Change had arrived suddenly, without warning, leaving uncertainty in its wake. Sensing the questions forming around her, Eliza raised her voice slightly. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment. The restaurant quieted again, staff and diners alike turning toward her. Tonight was unexpected for all of you, she acknowledged. But it represents something important, a first step toward changing how power operates in spaces like this. She gestured around the restaurant. Lumiere will continue operating, but with new policies regarding staff treatment and customer behavior. No one, regardless of wealth or status, will be permitted to abuse their position here. A ripple of approval moved through the staff. Even some diners nodded in agreement. This isn't about one night or one person, Eliza continued. It's about changing what we accept as normal. The buzz of phone notifications provided a fitting punctuation to her words. The story already spreading beyond these walls, challenging norms in other restaurants, other industries, other power structures. 3 months later, Eliza stood at the host stand of Lumiere, observing the evening service with quiet satisfaction. The restaurant hummed with energy tables filled, servers moving with confidence, the atmosphere noticeably lighter than during her first visit. The changes were both subtle and profound. Staff now wore name tags that included their professional credentials. Maria's identified her as floor manager, her decades of experience finally acknowledged in her position. Jackson had been promoted to head sommelier, his knowledge of wine now properly utilized and compensated. Reynolds was gone. Not fired, but reassigned to a smaller restaurant within the group where he was undertaking management retraining. His replacement, a woman with both culinary and business credentials, had instituted an anonymous feedback system for staff to report problematic customer behavior. Most notably, the clientele had shifted. While still upscale, the dining room now featured greater diversity in ethnicity, age, and background. The restaurant's new reputation had attracted a different type of wealthy patron, those who valued not just excellent food and service, but ethical business practices. "Ms. Matthews," a voice called from a nearby table, "would you join us for a moment?" Eliza approached the table where Chef Moreau sat with 3 aspiring chefs from his newly established mentorship program, all from backgrounds traditionally underrepresented in fine dining. "I was just telling my students about the changes in our industry," Moreau explained, his French accent still prominent, but his manner warmer than before. "Perhaps you could share your perspective?" Eliza smiled. "The most important change isn't in policy, but in expectation. We've normalized the idea that wealth entitles people to mistreat others. That's the system we're dismantling one interaction at a time." Later, as she prepared to leave, Eliza noticed a familiar figure dining alone at a corner table, Blackwell. The past months had not been kind to him. Following the ethics review, he'd been removed as CEO of his own company, though he remained a significant shareholder. The environmental violations uncovered during the investigation had resulted in substantial fines and a damaged reputation. He looked up as she passed, recognition flashing in his eyes, but instead of the expected resentment, she saw something closer to resignation. He nodded slightly, not friendly, but acknowledging her presence, her right to be there. It was a small gesture, but it represented the beginning of a shift from entitled expectation to earned respect. Outside in the cool evening air, Eliza paused to observe the restaurant through its windows. The scene inside, staff and patrons engaged in the ancient human ritual of breaking bread together continued without her. The system she'd helped change would continue evolving, guided by new values but propelled by its own momentum. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another restaurant group requiring intervention. Another opportunity to transform a toxic culture from within. True power isn't wielding authority, she thought, recalling the words her mentor had shared years ago. It's elevating others to find theirs. The words had guided her through the darkest periods of her career. Now they formed the foundation of her work at Integrity Capital, the philosophy behind each investment, each intervention. Did this story of quiet power and systemic change resonate with you? At PAP Stories, we believe in the transformative power of real-life stories that challenge the status quo and inspire meaningful change. Every week, we bring you authentic Black stories, touching stories, and powerful real-life stories that often go untold. Our collection features individuals just like Eliza, everyday heroes who refuse to accept injustice as normal and find the courage to stand up when it matters most. If you enjoyed this journey from invisibility to impact, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these essential narratives that change hearts, minds, and ultimately systems.